Our readings today revolve around one of the most important aspects of our life, faith. And just how important is faith for all of us here? Well, to tell you the truth, we really can't go to heaven without the gift of faith. Faith is connected to our salvation, to our redemption, to our eternal life with God. We are saved by God's grace through faith, which should be evident in our works. Faith is the beginning, the foundation, and the measure of how real God is in our lives. We cannot love God unless we believe in Him. And for the sake of the readings, especially today, faith is required for miracles. Now, to highlight that, I would like to say a little story. And the story is of a priest. His name was Father Jinto. And Father was finishing celebrating Mass, and he was putting all of the vessels away, such as the ciborium, the chalice, and so forth. While he was putting away the vessels, he heard a lot of noise outside of his church. And he looked outside of the window there, and what did he see? He saw a gang of men that were causing chaos in the town, and they were heading toward the church. They were stealing from stores, they were burning people's houses and killing people. So Father obviously was concerned, so he wanted to leave the church as soon as possible. But the one thing that he did before he left his church was get the key to the tabernacle, open the tabernacle, and take the ciborium full of the sacred hosts of the Holy Eucharist, and take the ciborium with him so that these gang of men would not desecrate or in an act of sacrilege harm the Blessed Sacrament. So he took the ciborium, and some of his parishioners were still in the church praying a Eucharistic Thanksgiving, and they decided to follow him out of his church. And bear in mind, Father Jinto had the Blessed Sacrament in the ciborium. So as he was leaving the church, he heard a voice, and it was a voice of a woman. And the woman said, "Son, you forgot me." And Father Jinto could have thought to himself, my mom? Maybe she was 60 miles away. So how is it that there's a voice of a woman saying that, "Son, you forgot me"? So he paused and thought about it, went back into his church and looked around, and he saw a huge statue of Mary. And Mary said through the statue, "Do not leave me to your enemies." So although Father was trying to save his life by as quickly as possible avoiding this gang of men, he thought, well, Mary's telling me to get her, so you can't really say no to our mother. So he already had the Blessed Sacrament in one hand, God, the Son of God, Jesus, his body, blood, soul, and divinity. And now he has to hold a big statue of Mary, which happened to be made out of alabaster. So I'm sure it was really heavy. So he gets the statue of Mary, and now he's a lot slower trying to avoid this gang of men. And they probably take the back way, trying to avoid the harm or the danger from this gang. And eventually they get a head start, but the gang of men sees most likely the statue of Mary. And they start running after Father Jacinto and some of his parishioners. So as they're trying to move along, avoiding these men, they eventually approach a river. And the river's current is really strong. So now Father Jacinto has a lot of choices. He could, one, try to swim across the river. Obviously, the current is very strong. Try to swim with the Blessed Sacrament and the huge statue of Mary in both of his hands and most likely drown. Or he could lay the statue of Mary and or the Blessed Sacrament and then try to swim across this river. Maybe he was like an Olympic swimmer. Maybe not. Or lastly, he could have tried to reason with this gang of men who would most likely kill him. And I have to say, in all honesty, some people are unreasonable. You just can't reason with them, and I think this was the case. So what did he do? I hope you do what he did. He prayed. He prayed to Jesus, not as if he was in the skies, in heaven. He literally prayed to Jesus, who was in his hands, and said, "My Lord, my God," and of course, "My Lady," although a statue of Mary, he still prayed to Mary. And he said, "I trust in you. I have faith in you. Please help me and some of my parishioners escape these men." So what happens? The river's current stops. Obviously a sign from God. So he crosses the river with the huge alabaster statue of Mary, and most importantly with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, with some of his parishioners behind him, and eventually they cross the river. And when they crossed the river on the other side, that gang of men eventually caught up with them. But guess what happened when that gang of men caught up with them? The river's current started flowing again. So they could have attempted to try to cross the river, but most likely they would have died. And the story goes that Father Jacinto and his parishioners came out of that river dry. Now, that's a true story. The priest that I'm speaking about is Saint Hyacinth. He's a Dominican saint, and he's one of the patrons or the apostles of Poland. So, if you ever see a statue or a picture of Saint Hyacinth, you will see him holding in one hand the Blessed Sacrament in a ciborium or sometimes a monstrance, and in the other hand, a huge statue of Mary. So, faith, it could stop rivers easily. All we do is we have to believe and surrender ourselves to God. So why do I bring this up? Just in case you didn't catch it in the Gospels. Jesus says that if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds, at least at that time, you would be able to tell a tree to move, and it would move. Better yet, in another part of the gospel, he says if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would be able to tell a mountain to move, and it would move. Has anyone ever seen a mountain move or a tree? We call this telekinesis, where you could move something with your mind. I would assume not. And yet, he's saying if you have faith the size of a mustard seed. And I think I would safely say probably most of us, if not all of us, have more faith than the size of a mustard seed here in this chapel. So besides physical objects moving, saints such as Saint Teresa of Jesus or of Avila, Saint Joseph Cupertino, they could fly, or they flew. Forget trees moving, flying is better. What about Padre Pio? He can not only move in one place, he can be at two places at once, called bilocation. St. Peter, as we know in the Gospels, he walked on water. St. Paul and St. Peter in the Acts of the Apostles brought people back to life. So instead of just a tree moving, someone else moving that was dead is a lot better. Or how about St. Francis controlling animals such as the wolf of Gubbio? So Jesus uses this example for us in the Gospels, but the point that he's trying to make is very simple. As cool as it is to move objects, physically speaking, what's better and best is to move an immortal soul closer to God. So an immortal soul really has no weight. It's, in the sight of Almighty God, infinite in his view. We are worth dying for. The blood of Christ was shed for our souls. So what's greater than moving a mountain? How about this? Is someone believing that Jesus looks like a piece of bread in the Eucharist? Far greater than moving a mountain. Or about someone admitting that they're a sinner, especially if they're in the state of mortal sin, and they go to confession. Way better than the whole creation of the whole physical world. Or what about someone trying to become a saint, being full of grace, rooting out sin, practicing virtue? Only grace can move a soul. So Jesus uses this analogy to show us how powerful faith is in our life. So do not base your faith on just what you can see, what you can hear, and what you can touch, or your senses will deceive you. There's a whole order of God's grace, his providence, that helps us see things in a supernatural way. We participate, in a certain sense, in the omnipotence of God by our gift of faith. So, do you pray for more faith? Do you pray for more faith on a daily basis? Do you do things to cultivate your faith as one of the most important aspects of your life? So some of the examples, how about from the beginning? Just say when parents conceive a child, do they pray not only for a healthy birth of their child, but do you pray that they may become saints, that they may become holy? Do you consider offering your child to Mary, to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The faith begins early. Even before the child is born, the parents are responsible for their faith. Or children, elementary, middle school, high school. Do you sanctify your work by your faith? Do you know that God is not only the author of the Bible, but He's the author ultimately of your math book, your science book? Faith and reason do not contradict one another. So do you realize that what you're studying is according to your duty of state of life, and doing that well with great love, offering that up here at this altar will help you become a saint? That's what faith does. It's no more something just to get over with. It is something as an encounter with God. How about young adults? Maybe those who think that they're called to marriage after they discern that. Do you pray for your future spouse? Do you pray for his or her holiness, for his or her purity, especially nowadays? This is how faith dictates our life. Or do we just see it simply in a very natural view? Oh, whoever I meet, it's all good. He or she might look pretty or handsome, but the virtues really don't matter. This is how we view, in many times within the church, our vocation. Or how about picking a college? Do we check to see whether or not they have a good, maybe Newman Center or church by? How is the faith practiced within the college, knowing that although it's going to be busy as a college student, will I have the means such as the sacraments, adoration, and confession to help me through my college career? For all of you who are married, is your primary goal in marriage to help your spouse get to heaven? Or is it just to have fun, companionship, to maybe do good hobbies together? Obviously, those are good things, but we should be more concerned about their salvation and how much they're growing closer to God. For all of those who may be elderly, not be able to move as much, are you able to sanctify your domestic duties by washing the dishes, maybe watching EWTN and praying a rosary? So in other words, faith should direct literally every moment of our life. And guess what? It's not boring. It's the most exciting thing ever to live by the gift of faith. The present moment is now ordained by God from all eternity for us to sanctify so we can be with God forever in heaven. This is the gift of faith. This is what will allow us to move more than mountains, more than trees. As much as if someone did that, the whole world will be posting it on the internet, on YouTube, on Facebook. If a mountain moved, if a tree moved and they caught it without the special effects, obviously, everyone would be all over it. And yet, when someone goes to Mass and offers themselves on the paten and the chalice, it's no news at all. People lack the gift of faith. So, how can you increase in faith? I just want to let you know, faith is a gift from God. He alone gives us faith. Like no one, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, can't literally give you faith. They could help you cultivate and grow, help you grow in the gift of faith, but faith is given by God. We receive it at baptism. So how can we grow in faith? Obviously, first and foremost, through prayer. We ask for it. But we also need to mention ongoing formation. So reading the catechism, maybe 10 minutes a day, along obviously with the Bible, will help you grow in faith. Reading a spiritual book. Do you have a spiritual book by your bed? Do you carry a spiritual book with you wherever you go? I'm sure maybe during your lunch break you could get 5 minutes of spiritual reading to increase faith so life can be a lot better. How about listening to talks? Talks can help you with your formation. We actually have a lot upstairs. Feel free to buy as much as you want. We have, obviously, the creed that we could say on a daily basis. That will help us cultivate faith. And we can actually make a formal act of faith every single day. So, friends, I think you get the point. We have faith, but are we growing in it? Are we growing in the grace of God to believe more and more in the ordinary circumstances of life, encountering the living God? We cannot please God without the gift of faith. So we say with the apostles, as we read in the Gospels, Lord, increase our faith. To begin in faith as a Catholic is for everyone. To persevere in it is for saints.